There have been approximately 5 billion videos about why Fire Emblem Three Houses is better than Fire Emblem Engage in every conceivable way. Getting it out of the way, I disagree with almost all of them, and I say almost because I stopped watching the new ones that cropped up. Ever since Engage came out, there's been this pervasive feeling of trying to prove that Three Houses is better, or that older Fire Emblems are better. And as someone who enjoyed both Three Houses and Engage, this feels weird. But hey, what's a little revenge between friends? I'm gonna go over the things mechanically that Engage does better than Three Houses, and to really hammer it home, I don't mean battle mechanics. Ever since its release, the common refrain has been that Fire Emblem Engage has, depending who you ask, some of, if not the best battle mechanics and map design that the series has ever seen. It's hard to find someone who will, in good faith, say that Engage has a bad battle system, so I'm calling that low-hanging fruit. Yes, Engage was really fun. The extra years of polish they got really showed, and if Three Houses had the same time, it could have been even better. So I'm not touching the battle system. Instead, let's examine the second half of the most common description of Engage, that the story and characters are irredeemable. So here's just a taste of what Engage does better than Three Houses in mechanics and story when it comes to its characters. My biggest criticism when I finished Three Houses was that it felt constrained by permadeath. At the end of the story, I looked back and it felt like even my favorite characters didn't matter. The game was clearly written around the idea that people would die before they could get any plot relevance, so moments that should be emotionally impactful for them only get a passing mention in the overworld. Cutscenes cannot include them, and so the only characters that really get the spotlight are the ones who can't die. Even when someone does show up, their lines feel awkward, like they were written to be easily removed. As someone who doesn't play with permadeath, it was considerably more a hindrance than a help in a story-driven game. To be clear, Engage also has permadeath, so past their introductory chapter, non-lord characters can also fade out of cutscenes over time. The difference is in number, and in those intro chapters existing at all. Three Houses hands you all your characters as soon as you pick up your house. Even ones that need recruiting later don't get any special introduction, they just show up and you can start buying them things. In Engage, first off, you just have more characters who can't die. Yes, there's one more lord, but it's not just the 4 of them and Alir. Some of the younger siblings also have to survive until certain points in the story, so even if they do fall in battle, they're still in the important cutscenes. Alchrist has to see his father's corpse and has to confront Ivy about it. Hortensia gets 3 boss battles before she's recruited and has a whole character arc on screen. Even if you're trying to get everyone killed, the story needs more of the characters, so it keeps them. It gives them lines and emotional weight and lets them exist, because it just does permadeath better by making it perma-injury for the people who matter. Mechanically the same, better for the story. Every single recruitable character in Engage gets an introductory chapter. Some of those characters, like Amber, Jade, and Linden, just get map introductions, which are worse. Just a few lines of dialogue and you might have to purposefully go pick them up. The other Lord and Retainer trios, though, each get a spotlight chapter where you get a glimpse of their personalities and their dynamic together, and you have to use them in battle before you can auto-bench them. Maybe Amber isn't to your taste. He certainly wasn't mine at first, but then you use him in his intro fight and find out that he is kind of a crit machine. A lot of characters also get introduced with an emblem already at their side, so you can see not just what the character can do, but what their emblem can do. Emblem Erica helps Rosado feel good to use in his intro chapter, even though the game kinda bogs down his good stats with the wrong weapons. All this combines to give most characters a chance to be liked, a chance to be used based on more than just design. In comparison, with Three Houses you start with 9 characters including Byleth, and your intro chapter once you picked your house is limited to just 5, with Byleth and the house leader being guaranteed slots. So of the remaining 7, you get to check out just 3, and all of them are at very low levels without much specialization. You got a few lines of dialogue from the character if you ran around enough, and the house leader's introduction. Okay, now choose who you'll care about for the rest of the game. Oh, and don't forget that even as your slots open up, so do your opportunities. Almost all of your recruitable characters outside the house are available shortly after. Basically the whole cast at your fingertips, and you have all of White Clouds to learn how to play the game, nurture the students you've got, and decide who in the entire school comes to war with you. Now let's say you want to get to know a character before taking them away from their home country to fight against childhood friends or frenemies or potential love interests, so you want to see a few supports first. It's not the easiest thing to grind with a character you haven't recruited yet, and some support lines can't even unlock the C supports past a certain point of story, so if you miss it, it's gone forever. Better choose carefully, right? But how? Heck, even with the characters in your house already, how do you know who to do supports between to better get to know your potential faves? Let's use Dudu as an example. He's a little enigmatic, it's hard to know how to approach getting to know him, but there's one that's easy, at least. Dimitri. It's obvious early on that Dimitri and Dudu are incredibly close, and that support line does provide some great context for their relationship and for both of their personalities. Great, where to next? Oh wow, he has supports with every other house member. Well, that's cool, but 7 is a lot of support lines to try to get, especially when Dudu might not be the only character you want to learn about. Anyway, we can narrow that down further. A supports only, maybe? Obviously, if he only has a B support with a character, that relationship isn't as important, right? Okay, well with that approach, we would miss out on Felix, which might be just fine, and Sylvain. The Dudu-Sylvain support is a scathing criticism of Fargus, and a clear view of public opinion of Dusker and Dudu. It's also a huge hint about the conspiracy surrounding the tragedy of Dusker, peeling back the layers of propaganda and calling it what it is. And you get all that from Sylvain, who before now you might have cast in your head as an airheaded playboy. Also, equally important, you find out that Sylvain and Dudu share a really dark sense of humor, laughing at the world for hating them, even as they acknowledge how impactful that hatred is. And there is absolutely nothing to point you towards Dudu and Sylvain having an incredible friendship, because they're stuck at B. The best you could do is if you see Sylvain's lost item that has to do with Strang and figure out that he's politically smart and interested in nations outside of Fodlan, which is like a real stretch on your first playthrough. Now let's go to Engage. Pendreo is my favorite character. Howling Priest is what pushed me over the edge into buying this game, and I was right, he's amazing. His introductory chapter shows that he is pious and in a weird spot with his deity just hanging around, and that he's close enough with his prince to give him shit for showing up late. You also have to use him in battle, so you click on Pendreo and hear his howl out of nowhere. That's 3 things you know about him already, and you want to know more, so you get to the supports. Once again, we have the obvious with his prince, Fogado, and that is one of the best supports in the game, hands down. And it's incredible to think that Pendreo is kinda being inconsiderate through the C and B support, only to find out in the A support that, nope, they're bonded for life, and Pendreo knows Fogado well enough to pretend that nothing's wrong, because he knows Fogado's mask is important to him. Great start. Now, where do we go? Well, Bune is Fogado's other retainer, so they work together directly. And in that one, we see that Pendreo was pushy with Fogado to go to parties, but he drops it immediately with Bune, who has sensory issues. We learn that Bune is weirdly self-flagellating and not a joke character like he might come off. Beyond those 2, let's expand like we did with Dudu to the whole country, all of Solm. For Pendreo, that adds Panette, who looks suspiciously similar, and Seedal. Panette shows Pendreo's serious side, just fully lays bare his trauma as it compares to hers. We hear Panette's real voice, and we get an amazing sibling dynamic, which is where Engage always shines. Meanwhile, in Seedal's support, Pendreo tries to reach out to Seedal and be his friendly self, and Seedal pushes him, doesn't respect his boundaries. Pendreo tries to play along, but ultimately does get upset at Seedal, the first time we see that Pendreo does stand up for himself. He's not a pushover. So that's 4 supports that show a wide range of Pendreo's personality, all without having to really guess at who he may or may not have a good support with. Admittedly, all of Pendreo's supports are bangers, so maybe it was cheating to choose him. But even going beyond the first degree of assumption, Dudu is still stuck with the same lack of direction on where to go to find his good supports. And Pendreo has more avenues. Like his religion, opening him up to interesting conversations with other holy men, Vander and Mavir, and Vale, who is a deity, just not his own. If I want to get to know an Engage character, I have so many places to get started, and that's before ever going, I like these 2 characters, let's see what happens when they have a support. I'm almost done, but I do have to highlight another Engage character who doesn't have the benefit of being a retainer, Yunaka. Because Yunaka is such an early recruit, while you're building supports early on, if you want to get to know her, you only have a few options with Alfred, Etier, and Louis, and then Citrine shortly after. I'd say 3 out of 4 of those are fantastic supports that show a lot of depth to both Yunaka and her support partner, Alfred in particular being one of my favorite character moments in the game. Then as you go forward, you can decide if you want to keep learning about Yunaka, and you unlock new support options like Zelkov, her fellow ex-assassin, slowly enough to keep up. Engage wants you to know its characters, and it gives you breadcrumb trails every step of the way. 3 houses, puts them in your lap, and says good luck. I love both games though. Hell, I played every route of 3 Hopes and loved that too. So let's end on some positivity. If the characters of 3 Houses and Engage met, who do you think would be like instant besties? I'll start. If Sylvain met Alchrist, the adoration would be instant. He would see all the shit that Alchrist is doing behind the scenes and try to convince him to admit in private how skilled he is while keeping up the public facade. Saline and Lawrence would meet for tea and politics and it would be brutal. But at the end of that tea time, they'd have drafted up 5 new laws. And if the Fogato trio got a hold of Felix, he would never go home. He'd have good food, a ton of respect from Fogato, and Pandrea would work his ass off to make that poor man howl.